Hey everybody, welcome back. We are basically going to start a small, I guess, mini series here where I'm going to do definitely a video for buyers and a video for sellers in my walk and talk series here, where I just kind of go over some of the things that I feel are important to talk about, if you're on the buyer side, and certain important things to know if you're on the seller side of buying and selling ball pythons. I guess this would apply to any exotic animal purchase, I guess, through Morph Market or any other way, but we're going to focus on ball pythons because that's what I've done. Maybe if I have some like insider secrets to share, a couple things I'm going to touch on that are sort of in that category in this video. We'll see where it goes. I don't have anything scripted out, so I'm just going to sort of talk off the cuff. And if there's anything more specific that I don't cover in these next couple of videos that you want to have me talk about, please let me know, because as my last video said, or one of my last videos said, I'm basically done at this point. I have one clutch left. By the time this video posts, I will have already cut it, and probably have the video posted on YouTube. So, I'll know what I got out of that clutch, and that'll be the last snakes I have to sell. So this video is going to be about buying and the things that I think buyers need to know prior to purchasing and while they're purchasing and after they're purchasing even. But more stuff that isn't as simple as, when is it safe to ship and things like that. Those are really not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the economics of buying in this video. If you don't know who I am, I've bought and sold hundreds of ball pythons on Morph Market. My store is one of the most highly rated and followed stores on Morph Market. I had been breeding since 2019 and have been in the reptile industry as a hobbyist pet owner since I was 6 years old. I am old and 40 at this point. So I have tons of experience with keeping, and if you look at my statistics on Morph Market, tons of experience buying and selling as well. I have personally decided to get out of the hobby because as I'm, growing, learning things, I have found out that I have do a pretty decent job at day trading stocks, and it's an easier path for me to wealth and an easier path for me to make my family financially secure. So I can't split myself between a bunch of different jobs. I need to kind of focus on one thing, and that's kind of the way I'm going. So I'm getting out of the hobby, but I still have a ton of things to share with people. That's what I'm doing in this video. Every video I basically made on my channel. So, buyers. There's a certain couple things that we need to get out of the way before we start talking about anything a little more advanced. And people need to understand basic things like supply and demand, which I don't think people grasp the concept of. People, and we'll go into it in a little more detail here, people need to do their research before they place an offer on a snake. And they need to respect and show some respect to the seller. So I've bought and sold, I've been the buyer and the seller on a bunch of different transactions, ones that have worked, ones that haven't worked. And so I have a ton of experience, and I'm speaking to that in these videos. So first, supply and demand, which kind of affects everything else. If you don't know what supply and demand is, supply is how much of something is available. Is there one available? Is there 1,000 available? Demand is how many buyers there are for that thing. Is there one buyer? Or are there 1,000 buyers? If there's only one thing available, but there's 1,000 people that want it, that thing is going to go for a very high price. But if there's 1,000 of something and there's only one buyer for it, that buyer has all of the buying power in the world to get the best deal, because all of those sellers are competing to sell that one to that one buyer. So whether you take that concept and talk about housing, or talk about maybe things that are more relevant to you guys. To me personally, when I grew up, Beanie Babies were the craze, right? Everybody wanted the Beanie Babies. There were the rare Beanie Babies and the plain Beanie Babies. As we got into the 2000s, I believe Tickle Me Elmo was like the big kids toy that everybody was trying to find, you know, around Christmas time. Nowadays, it's, you know, your PlayStation 5s or your Nintendo Switch 2. They're hard to get. So what happens? If you can't get one retail, scalpers get them. And scalpers are selling those for $100, $200, $300, $400 over retail price, because the demand, the supply for those, and this is a complete side note, John thing. I think Nintendo and Sony, because I'm a gamer, not as much as I used to, but I bought the Switch 2 when it came out. I bought the PS5 when it came out. I like playing Mario Kart with my kids. I don't know how Nintendo, it benefits Nintendo or Sony to not in advance pump out production of these systems supply, because they know the demand is going to be there. Anyways, it's just stupid. If you're in the market for Nintendo Switch 2, like everybody was, they were lining up to get the pre-orders. I luckily got one. And if you didn't get one, you had to buy one from a scalper. And that Nintendo Switch 2 is $500. A scalper selling it for $600, $700, $800, or whatever you had to buy it for to get it from that scalper. Because demand was through the roof and supply was very minimal. Everybody wanted one, but there weren't any available. Labubu's, if you don't know what they are, I didn't know what they were until recently, and I just finally found a couple for my kid. They're little like anime stuffed animals. Everybody wants them right now. They're these little like stuffed animals that come on keychains, and your retail is $30, $35, but some of the more rare ones are over $100, $200, $300. Supply and demand. But in just the way that the Beanie, I kind of compare that to Beanie Babies, the Labubus to the Beanie Babies. At some point, the Labubu, or the Tickle Me Elmo, or the Beanie Baby isn't going to be the fad anymore. So what's going to happen is that the retail prices on those are going to go flat. They're probably going to just sit at retail price for a while. Eventually, you're going to see them starting to go on sale at Target or Walmart, whoever else has them. Prices come down. You're going to find it in stores, and the demand's not going to be there anymore. So the retailer doesn't have any choice but to lower the prices. So, ball pythons. That's what I've been talking about for the last 2 to 3 years on my channel. If there are 1,000 pieds, just plain pieds on Morph Market, plain pieds, nothing else in them, how many buyers do you think there are for that snake? Not very many. Because if you've been listening to my channel, I would tell you to never buy that snake if you're planning to breed. Because all you're going to do is produce more pieds that are not going to get you a whole lot of money for them. Not a good investment. So, as a buyer, let's say you did want a pied just as a pet. You have all of the buying power, negotiation in the world. Because if there's 1,000 plain pieds, and obviously nobody wants them, I can tell you that, just a plain pied. And there's people that have them at $100, $200, $300. Obviously the people at $300 are out of their mind trying to sell them at that price. And the people at $100 are probably being very aggressive with the way they're pricing those. So if you wanted one, you could get it for whatever you wanted to. You know, whether it's $100 or $75, I don't know, but you have all of the power in that transaction. On the flip side, let's say a DG Xanthic pied comes up. I don't know if any of those has ever been sold on Morph Market, right? I couldn't even tell you what one of those would sell for. Let's just say 25 grand. Now, at this point in time, I would never tell you to spend that money on that snake. Is it worth that much? Probably. You know, it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay. But in my opinion, or the market is, I would say it's a terrible buy. You'd be better off buying a DG Xanthic head pied for probably half the price or less. Anyways, if somebody's asking 25 grand for it, well, and there's one available, and there might be a dozen, 2 dozen, 50 people that want it, they can ask whatever they want. They might not get it. They might have to come, maybe they come down to 20 grand, but you who, you know, if you have $1,000 in the bank and you say, look, man, you message the seller and say, I just have $1,000, you know, could you sell to me for 1,000? Well, if I was a seller, I'd probably block you because I think you're an idiot. I'm wasting my time. That's not realistic. There's one of them available. It's extremely rare and hard to make. So that seller has all of the power in the world. So that's a basic overview of supply and demand in the retail world and in the ball python world. The second aspect of buying is doing your research and knowing what the price of an animal is. And I'll give you a perfect example. So last year, this is me being dumb, me not thinking ahead, or maybe it was a change in circumstances or events. I decided I wanted to buy a DG clown pied because of everything I had in my collection. And there's like 1 or 2 available on the market. And there's a couple that sold, and there were a couple that were similar with a couple genes, whatever. And so I'm looking at all the pricing. I'm looking at what this one's listed for, and I do my calculations. I look at how the age of the listing, how long it's been available, and I make an offer. It's a realistic offer. It's definitely below what they're asking because I knew that's a couple months old. There are similar animals available, or maybe a little different, but similar, that are a little less expensive. And at this price range, there's not a ton of buyers, and it's not a completely unique animal. But here's what I'll do. I'll offer you this. He came back and said, yeah, I appreciate it. Hey, that's a decent offer, but I can't go lower than this number. I said, fine, I'll take it. So we met in the middle, basically, of where, I don't remember. Let's just say he had it listed for 15 grand. I asked 10 grand, and we met at 12,500. Let's just say that's what happened. But, you know, he knew what his special number was to sell it, and I knew what my number was to buy it. And I also knew what the animal's worth. I didn't come in and offer him 3 grand or 5 grand because at that point, a DG clown was 5 grand. So he has a DG clown pied, which is infinitely harder to make than a DG clown. And those are things you need to know when you're doing your research. So, as an example, a personal one from last week or 2 weeks ago, when I was asking people to send me offers for those wholesale clutches, and I cut them open and I showed you what was inside, and I said, send me realistic offers. Don't, you know, I'm not in this game of, you know, playing cat and mouse, and somebody offered me $500 for it when there was 6 or 7 genes potentially in these babies, and you could see that some of them are really crazy looking. Obviously it wasn't realistic because you're offering, there were 4 eggs, you're offering me 125 per baby. Nobody would have accepted that offer. So that person, in my opinion, either it was just wasting my time, or they had no idea what the values of those snakes were. And so as a buyer, it is your job, and this is the part in the buying side of it that as a seller, I absolutely can't stand and have like zero tolerance for. Like the fake, being like naive and pretending like you don't know anything, or pretending like, oh, I didn't know it was worth that. I mean, it's all BS. Morph Market. If you don't know how to get on Morph Market and look up, you know, this is what a clown pied is worth. Search up clown pied and see what they're all valued at, and see what all the sold ones are valued at. Then you shouldn't be placing lowball offers of what's available in your bank account, because at the end of the day, the seller does not care how much cash you have on hand. It doesn't make a difference to them. They're trying to make their money. They spent, maybe 1 year, 2 year, 3 or 4 years raising the parents of the snake to get to this clutch, and they have a ton of money invested in it, and it doesn't matter to them if you can only afford $100. Like, that's not how this thing works. Like, there's a certain amount of money that everybody has spent, invested into their collection when they're breeding. And as a buyer, you need to know there are times that a seller can be unrealistic with pricing, which is where your job as a buyer is to do the research to know if what you're paying or willing to pay is a realistic price. Because yeah, you can be price gouged. I'm not saying that all sellers are honest, but in 2025, when Morph Market has, if there's 30,000 snakes on there now that are still for sale, I guarantee you there's 150,000 listings or more of sold animals that you can research and look into. Now, they don't always help, because if it's a 3-year-old listing and that's the last sold snake that's similar, you know, the price isn't going to be accurate anymore. But at least you can kind of be in the ballpark. Excuse me. There's no excuse at this day and age as a buyer to just say, oh, I didn't know. I had no idea. Or to come in and lowball somebody. Because here's why. Me personally, I don't take it personal when somebody lowballs me, but I do lose respect for the person in terms of the transaction, right? Like, I'm not going to take the person seriously at that point, because I know that they either haven't done the research or don't have any value for what I'm offering, right? And so if there's no mutual respect there, or at least coming from one direction, then I'm not going to just show respect back the other direction just for no reason. It needs to be mutual. You're making an agreement with somebody. You're paying money for a snake, and you're expecting a certain quality, right? And I'm producing a certain quality. I'm expecting a certain amount of money for it. So there needs to be an agreement, and there needs to be mutual respect. So if somebody comes in and lowballs me, honestly, most of the time, I'm just like, no. I just say no. I don't even write more. If they're going to send me an email and say, it's a $2,000 snake, and they say, best I can do is $250, I just say no. And then I archive it, and I don't look at it again. I don't even offer a bigger response than that. Because again, I don't care if you can't afford the snake. That's not how you don't walk into a BMW dealership for a $100,000 BMW and say, hey, I got 10 grand in the bank. Let's make a deal. He's going to point you to the used car lot with the Beamer that has 100,000 miles on it. Like, that's just not how this works. I can't put you in a brand new BMW, but I can get you one that's 10 years old, 100,000 miles for $10K. That's what you're getting. you're not getting a brand new Beamer. So there's, I mean, obviously new buyers coming into the market all the time. And there's a lot of education that needs done on that end. And they aren't doing it, right? And as a seasoned buyer and seller, but for this purpose, I'm a seller, I'm aware that not everybody buying from me is experienced with either keeping or buying. And I take that into consideration. And believe me, just to be transparent, it shows when somebody sends me a message, whether or not that person's experienced or intelligent. It shows up in the messages. You want to make a good first impression as a buyer, because believe me, when I've had people that have been lowballers or rude or pompous, it's been very easy for me to just reject it altogether and say, sorry, I'm not dealing with you, because I can tell you're already gonna be a pain in the ass. But when I've had people that are easy to deal with, that pay right away, that don't cause trouble, that are good customers, not only am I eager to do business with them, I'm eager to give them discounts next time around, because I want them to keep coming back. If you're a good buyer, if you're a good customer, it's very easy to build a relationship with a seller. Everybody on my Patreon has bought multiple snakes from me. And every time they buy another one, I'm more willing to give them a discount the next time. Or more of a discount, a bigger discount. And as I've purchased more and more snakes from certain breeders, let's say Aussie, because I spent a shit ton of money with Aussie, he was more willing to work with me with pricing because he knew I was coming back and spending $5,000 a clip, $10,000 a clip. And if he keeps getting me back there, those are easy sales. And those are the sales you want. You don't want to keep having to deal with new customers all the time that you don't have a rapport with. So as a buyer, you want to build a good relationship with sellers, all of them. And you also have to realize when the seller raises a red flag, when they're going to be somebody that's sort of shady that you don't want to deal with. Just because there's a snake you want doesn't mean that you should be buying it from that person. So not only do you need to have education in terms of research and what the snake is, whether it's ID'd properly, whether it's valued properly, you also need to do research into who the seller is. There's a lot of sellers. I had a couple experiences as a buyer where I went and paid for a snake and I got screwed out of money. It was a snake I wanted, and luckily it wasn't expensive. It was like $500 or $600, but I paid for the snake. I never got it, and the seller's store disappeared. Now, I don't remember if they had any reviews or not. I don't think they did. So you have to be wary of new accounts. Doesn't mean all new accounts are bad, because at some point I had a new account. I had no sales, but maybe I had purchases. And you can see on Morph Market if somebody has been a buyer or seller. So even if I hadn't sold before, you can see that John at Snake, well, at that time it was Blind Strike Exotics, I had purchases. So I had transactions on the site. If you see a brand new store that just popped up with 0 ratings on the buy or sell side, do not pay cash. Don't pay PayPal Friends and Family. Don't pay Zelle. Don't pay Venmo. Those are transactions where I would only pay by credit card, because you have no idea who that person is. And you probably vet them out a little bit if you can, or tell by their tone whether or not you feel like it's somebody you can trust, because you can't trust everybody. So you need to do, I guess overall, as a buyer, you need to be educated. You need to know what the snake is, whether the genetics seem accurate. And if you don't know how to ID genetics, and believe me, IDing multi-layer codom snakes were always probably the hardest thing for me to do. I would never say I was an expert at it. I was an expert at figuring out pairings, at selling, at advertising, at making content. But for me, IDing was never my strong suit. And I have done a lot of work trying to ID stuff. So you gotta do that. You gotta know who the seller is. You gotta try to build a rapport. You need to try to be respectful. The next big part, and if I forget anything or come up with anything else, after this video, I'll maybe make a follow-up video. Because like I said, I'm just doing this off the cuff. I'm just trying to, I was thinking about stuff the last couple of days in terms of, what I should talk about in this video, and some of it will get lost in the mix. But if there's other stuff I haven't touched on, comment below if there's something else important that you want me to talk about. But I think the last, maybe final, most important thing to talk about is physically actually building the collection. And what should that be? And I'll just tell you up front before I get into it in more detail, is if you're looking to build a business, even a small one, just as a hobby, that you should not be buying anything that's $100. Buying anything that's, and assuming you're looking at fair pricing for something. Buying something at $200. Buying 10 $100 animals. Because remember what the first thing we talked about was supply and demand. And guess what happens with demand on something that's old? An old combo, an easier to make combo. Guess what? DG Pieds, there weren't a lot of them around 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. There's a lot more now. DG Pieds, 3 years ago, you could probably sell them for 10 grand a piece. An OD, Orange Dream DG Pied, probably a lot more. Last year, I was maybe clearing 2,000 or 2,500 on Super OD DG Pieds. Even harder to make. And now, I haven't looked, I guarantee you they're well under 2,000. So as more people get these snakes and start producing them, they get easier to make. That also takes more buyers off the market. If you already bought a DG Pied, you don't need a DG Pied anymore. So the demand goes down a little bit and the supply goes up. Less buyers, more snakes, equal lower prices. So you need to understand that when you're building a collection, the quality of the project, you need to be heavy recessives. That's always going to be true. Good recessives, don't go big in albino. I've said that like every video recently. You are not trying to go heavy in albino. Clown and Pied are safe. DG is safe. Obviously, I prefer MJ Xanthic. You can sprinkle in, Sunset or whatever else you want to work with, but you should be recessive heavy. And adding in, sprinkling in codoms is a major upgrade on those animals, because there's a big difference in price, sales, if you're making a DG Pied versus a Super OD YB DG Pied. The price difference in terms of what you can sell it for is big when you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 codoms in a snake. But you want to think long term. And obviously I'm not suggesting that you go spend $20,000 tomorrow on your first 4 snakes, but instead of buying 10 $100 snakes, maybe you should buy 2 $500 snakes. buy a pair or buy three $300 snakes and just get snakes that are a little nicer. Breed those, get some clown pieds, get some DG pied stuff, get some exanthic pied stuff, whatever, however you want to do it, exanthic clowns. Breed them and see if it's for you. If you like doing it, if you can do it. Because I've talked to a lot of people that have had a lot of issues, whether it's incubating or raising the babies or getting fertile clutches. There is some science behind this. You need to be good at actually the husbandry of the snakes and breeding the snakes and hatching the snakes and selling the snakes. So all of that comes into play, but that's not about buying. This video is about buying. That's about husbandry. Maybe there's a video about husbandry in the future. But don't overdo it. The issue with this hobby, and I will scream this from the top of the mountains and tell them blue in the face, is there's too much overproduction. There are too many people that produce a bunch of snakes, supply that nobody wants, demand, and they're just sitting there. And they're going to continue to sit there in racks. There's not enough buyers for them. And the snakes, from a genetic standpoint, suck. You know, they're all animals and all their lives should be taken seriously, which is the way I've always dealt with it. But that doesn't mean the genetics don't suck from a breeding perspective. So if you have a rack full of a bunch of Enchis and Mojaves and black pastels, and there's no recessives in there or whatever, you're never going to sell them. And by the time you do, you're going to lose money on them. And there's too many stores that have hundreds of snakes that have been up for sale for a year, or 2 years, or 3 years that aren't selling for multiple reasons. One, because there's too much available in Morph Market. Two, because they're too plain and the genetics suck. And three, because the seller is being unrealistic with their pricing of that snake. That's something that needs to stop in this hobby. These people that are trying to make this a living while producing a bunch of genetically snakes that have genetic garbage are honestly probably the ones that are tanking everything for everybody else, because they're just overproducing crap and they're flooding the market. And if you saw one of my exanthic pieds, you'd see it on Morph Market if there are only 5,000 snakes, and you'd want to buy it. But when there's 6 times that many snakes on there, and there's basically impossible for you to find it in those listings, because the second I post it, it's on the front page of Morph Market. And I guarantee you, with 30,000 listings refreshing every day, or every day they refresh. I think Morph Market lets you refresh an ad on the high end like every 18 days, or on the low end like every 28 days. So every day there's thousands of ads refreshing. The second I post those ads, they're already back 10 pages. And I bet you by the next day, it's back 30 pages. You'll never see them, because they're being flooded by a bunch of shitty snakes. So you don't want to produce more of that as a buyer. You don't want to buy those things. And the whole industry needs to get away from that. Now, kind of piggybacking off that a little bit, in one of my little kind of insider kind of points of view that might piss some people off and step on some toes. Don't chase fads like lace, and don't overpay for a snake that somebody else has for cheaper. And I don't mean to aim this all at Canova, because Justin has been huge for the industry. I mean, he's in my opinion probably made this
40 years
industry boom more than anybody else has, and everybody that's doing it now probably owes him a great deal of gratitude for the way he's grown the industry with the different morphs and combos and all those things. But I referenced this in a video previously. You can't chase codoms because they're so easy to reproduce. Lace, banana. If you're paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a new codom, and you're at the beginning of your journey and you don't have the ability to reproduce it right away, by the time you are able to produce those and sell those snakes, they're not going to be worth anything. You can buy lace now for pennies on the dollar versus what they were selling for 3 years ago. And not all snake prices are down, so it's not like it's just I guess it is a bubble, but you can't chase a specific codom. You would have been better off chasing DG pieds back then than chasing lace. And the other part of that is, if somebody like Canova has snake that's, let's just say, a DG pied, these aren't exact numbers because I haven't looked at pricing on these, but let's just say they have a DG pied listed for $5 grand, brand new hatchling, and somebody else has it listed for, or even if the majority of other sellers have them listed for $3 grand, it does not do you any good as a buyer to pay a premium just to buy from Canova. Now, I don't know if they'd be willing to negotiate that price down close to the other ones or not. I've only bought a handful of snakes from Canova, and most of those were during the time where everything was expensive and demand was very high, supply was low. And most of the snakes I bought from Canova were like one of ones. So that goes back to the whole supply demand thing. He had one of this snake, and at some point it was going to sell for what they wanted it to. But this is also, this DG pied example is the other side of it. There's a lot of DG pieds now. So if Canova's snake is marked up 10, 20, 30, 40% over somebody else's, and you can trust the quality of the other seller's animal, it doesn't do you any good to spend twice as much, 30% more, 40% more on a snake when you can get it for less. I don't care who it's coming from. Because yes, getting that sale, it's nice to say, oh, I have a Canova snake. Great. But what does that really gain from you in the long run? Does it really make a difference? If you're making OD DG pieds in 3 years, how much more do you think you're going to be able to sell those OD DG pieds that you can save from Canova versus ones that weren't? All these snakes came from the same place. You know, like some people that say, oh, I like to have Canova snakes, that's fine. But there's also thousands of buyers. So even if there's one person willing to pay a 10% markup because, you know, the grandfather of your snakes was from Canova, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to give a shit about that or anybody's going to give a shit about it. And you're just overpaying for stuff at that point. So don't pay a premium price for a name brand, right? You know, like there would have been no difference between buying a DG pied from me versus Canova, but I would have had to sell mine for $1,000, $2,000 less because I'm not Canova. You would have gotten the same animal, same genetics, but paid a lot less for it. And that is huge when you don't have infinite money to spend. If you're looking to just make, you know, Miguel, and everybody give him shit when he first came on the scene, he had a ton of money. He made great connections with, I guess, Justin. He spent a lot of money with Justin, and they became, you know, two of the bigger big shots together in the industry. And great for him. He did what he had to do. He made a name for himself, and he made a bunch of money. But how many of you are in that situation where you can just say, man, I got $1 million. I'm just going to go to Canova. He's going to tell me what to buy, and I'm going to have this concierge service with him, and then we're going to be best buddies, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to be making $1 million in a couple of years. No, none of you. None of you have that ability. So for you to take if you only have $5 grand to spend on some nice snakes, which would go a long way nowadays with the way prices are, if you can get things for half as much elsewhere, do it. Because you're not guaranteed of what that purchase from Canova is going to get you versus what you'd be getting buying something somewhere else. So on top of that, right now, with the way the market is, and I've used this example in the past couple of videos, when there's somebody like me who's getting out, who's a name brand breeder, who has a ton of experience and a ton of sales, and I'm wholesaling snakes for really cheap compared to what everybody else is selling stuff for, that's something you jump on as a buyer, because you're not, like, the odds of you getting a deal like that to get nice snakes from a good breeder at a cheap price, it's a blue moon event. Like, it's like seeing an eclipse. Like, it's not going to happen again. So you take advantage of it when you can, and now is a great time to do it, because unfortunately, you know, like, personally, I'm getting out from a place of strength. Like, I'm selling all my stuff out, I'm still making good money off of it, but I'm leaving because I'm making more money doing something else. There's a lot of people getting out now, unfortunately, that are sitting on hard times, or just don't have the time for it anymore, or they started buying in at the wrong time and haven't been able to breed yet and are down a lot of money. And that's very unfortunate. I feel bad for them, and I have some people in my Patreon that are in that situation, and it sucks. I mean, it's a bad... I started doing this in 2019, so I was kind of in long enough and before a little before the boom, so that I was able to make my money back and then some. A lot of these people aren't in that situation, but from a buyer's perspective, it's the best time for you to take advantage of that, because you're going to find a lot of nice snakes at some really great prices. And you know, hopefully he doesn't care, but I have a Patreon customer who's getting out. His name's Alan. His business name is Priceless Pythons. He's selling everything he has, and from a little bit I looked, he's got some really, because a lot of them are from me, he has some really great animals that he's selling at really deep discounted prices. So go look at his Morph Market store. He's a very respectable guy, and that's going to be an example of, like, unfortunately, he has to get out of the hobby because he needs the cash, but you're going to benefit from that. So those are the things you need to take advantage of a buyer. When you see the opportunity, you have to take it. But you got to be smart. You can't just gobble up everything because you want to gobble it up, because there isn't... If you're paying retail price at this point, you're not going to be able to resell those things to make money off of it. You have to be getting good deals. And the longer you hold something, the less valuable it's going to be. And I learned that the hard way with some stuff. There were some animals a couple years back. I had this crazy blue-eyed Lucy pairing. There was like phantom, crystal, blackhead leopard. These crazy blue-eyed Lucies that came out there, like purple, and like looked like they had yellow lightning bolts all over them. In the one, I kept 2 and I sold 2 from this clutch, and the ones I sold were like $1,500 a piece, babies, straight out of the eggs, you know. And I kept the other 2 thinking, oh, well, these are awesome. I'm going to breed those and see what they look like. Well, you know, after raising them for 2 or 3 years, I never got to the point where I bred them. And instead of me making $1,500 a pop on them, I don't know if I made $1,000 combined off of them. So I lost out on like $2 grand by holding these snakes, not being forward looking, thinking to myself, well, in 2 years, am I really going to breed blue-eyed Lucies? Because at that point, I was already in lightning pieds. I was already getting in the clown pieds, DG pieds, triple recessives. And if I wasn't, you know, short-sighted, I would have thought to myself, man, these are worth a lot of money right now. I should just sell them. Everything's going to depreciate. Not barely, unless a gene pops out of nowhere and Canova makes some crazy combo with it, and it makes the price of it surge up. That's like a once-in-a-lifetime thing. If you had a bunch of lace before Justin made his lace video a few years back, you're in a great spot, but you can't chase it. The same way that I've learned over the last year, I can't chase a stock. If it already went up 20%, trying to buy into it when it's already up 20% is going to lose you a shit ton of money, because it can drop 20% or 30% just as quickly as it went up 20%. So you can't chase codons, you need to be in before they pop up. But right now, when people are getting out of the hobby, and I didn't really touch on this yet. I had a video where I was going to make it and I never made it. But in my opinion, I don't know, this ties it into to the economy and the stock market a little bit. Nobody knows. I've read both sides of the story. Some people think we're in a recession, or going to be in a recession, and the stock market's going to crash soon. Some people think that can't possibly happen anymore because of the way that the government, the Fed, prints money. There's two sides to every story. I'm kind of on the side that thinks that AI is too prominent and Mag 7 are too big for us to go into a recession. I lean towards that way, but I can't say I'm sure one way or the other. But what I do know is that manual labor jobs, trades jobs, healthcare jobs, teaching jobs are all jobs that are sort of evergreen in our current world. And I would have to assume that a lot of the people in this industry fit into those kind of blue collar working class job categories. I don't see those people losing jobs because of AI. I don't see those people losing jobs in a recession, if we ever get one. And I don't think this industry is going anywhere. I think what happened is that because the Fed, the government printed too much money during COVID, and there were so many people that were looking at it as ball pythons, like as a get rich quick scheme, that everything was overproduced. There were, obviously still are, way too many babies in the morph market, way too many snakes, adults, and it just crashed the market. Like there was too much and there wasn't enough people buying it. But as a seller, I can tell you that I have made a lot of money this year selling everything else I had, even these babies. I'm still making a lot of money, so there's still money to be made, but you have to have smart pairings, and you need to have a smart breeding plan, and you need to make smart purchases. All of this goes back to, you need to be smart about how you're buying and how you're selling. You need to be smart about your research. You have to be smart about your setup. You need to just be well read. You need to know how everything works. You need to know which genes are worth buying. And if you can't figure that out, then you need to start doing more research. I have a ton of videos, hundreds of videos on this channel, if not thousands at this point, to talk about all those sorts of things. I talk mainly about the things I know about, because I never really veered into zebra or sunset or monsoon or whatever else there is. I stayed in my lane. I talk what I know about. I talk about my sales. I know what I sold. I know how much I sold it for, and I relay that information to you guys. But you need to seek out that information to understand what's working and what isn't. You need to go on Morph Market and look at the current pricing of something that you're looking to buy. You need to go on the Morph Market and look at the recent sold listings of the things you're going to buy, because that informs you about how much you should be paying for something versus what the current prices are, because those always don't match up. So as a buyer, and the seller video is probably gonna be a lot different in terms of talking, being a buyer it's more important for you to be well read, to do a lot of research, and to understand what you're buying and what you need to buy than really anything else. So do your research, understand what you're trying to get into, understand what you're buying, and you're going to have a great start to your business.